Okay, so let me first of all welcome Rachel Schofield, to the Business Bookcase interview this month. Rachel is the author of our November book of the month, which is called The Career Change Guide, 5 Steps to Finding Your Dream Job. Fab, thank you. So yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for your time today, Rachel. I know time is precious, but this is really useful to have someone kind of talk through the book. So thank you for that. And I will obviously be placing a post with a link to the recording for folk who either have or haven't read the book or would like to read the book. So without further ado then, my first question, Rachel, is actually what prompted you to write the book?
It's a slightly funny story, actually, because people always say, so, had you always wanted to write a book about career change, and how did you get it published? I had a very weird experience, and I'm delighted I did write the book. So let me front load that. It's my specialist area. I'm a career change coach. And in a way, writing comes naturally to me. I had a life as a journalist at the BBC for 20 years before I became a qualified coach, and we might talk about that. But the book came about out of the blue. So I was talking about career change on a podcast and got an email a couple of months later that dropped into my inbox saying, I work for Penguin, Michael Joseph, which is one of the imprints at Penguin. Have you ever thought about writing a book? Because we'd like something on career change. And I thought it was a hoax. I was like, is this one of these scams where someone says, write a book, you only have to pay us £20,000 and we'll publish it, So there's me on LinkedIn, desperately searching up Fenella Bates, which is the name of the person who approached me. And to cut a long story short, the brilliant Fenella Bates did indeed work for Penguin Michael Joseph and was serious about me writing the book. And it went from there. So I was approached, which felt like a real privilege and very exciting, but also quite out of the blue. So I did end up writing the book. I loved writing it. It was a great way of capturing the methodology that I was already using with my clients, but it was not something that I had set out to do. So it was a rather lovely surprise in a way.
How nice to be approached off the back of a podcast, which you kind of always hope that that's what a podcast is going to give you, but to actually have it happen.
Yeah, but it was a bit of a fluke.
Yeah. So you mentioned your BBC career there, and I did recognise you, I have to say, when I saw the photo. And I know from reading the first part of the book that you were there for 20 years, and you obviously have had a career change yourself. So maybe you could give us a couple of minutes on what prompted that.
Yeah, and I think that's why, in a way, the book made particular sense, and probably why they approached me, because I had both the coach training and the career shift methodology through my coaching, but also the lived experience, which for a lot of us, and I include myself, is that it's quite a scary space to suddenly think, oh, I've got itchy feet. And there's a kind of spectrum of itchy. Some people have itchy feet. I think I had itchy feet. Some people are miserable and hate it and stressed and need to get out. And everyone else sits somewhere in between. And for some people, that's a feeling that they have occasionally and eventually goes away. And for some people, it lingers until it becomes too loud a voice to ignore. And I think for me, I'd had a really happy career at the BBC. I started there straight out of uni, worked my way, as many people do, through local TV and radio up in the Northeast, and then eventually came down to London, worked at Radio 4 as a reporter, and then moved to the BBC News Channel and worked as a presenter doing kind of rolling news, which in many ways people are like, well, that's super exciting, being on the telly and anchoring a news program. And in many ways there was lots of things I liked about it. The BBC was a great place. I had lovely colleagues, but eventually I'd just been doing it a long time. And I think, like anything else, sometimes you just think, do I want to do this for another 20 years? Because at the time I was, sort of in my early 40s. And I think I had just been mulling over, maybe there's something else I could do. So for me, it was that process of thinking, well, what else could I do? What might that look like? What skills do I have that I could take somewhere else? How will I explain this to people? And all of the little voices that start coming in that are basically saying, that's a stupid idea, stay where you are. But I fought that voice. I decided, at the same time as I was still working for the BBC, I decided to train as a coach, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do with it. So I had what a lot of people have in career change, a kind of period of transition where I'm putting my toe in the water around something else, thinking I'm sure this could lead to something or certainly be an interesting skill set to gain. It played into a lot of the things I was already doing. So both coaching and journalism require a lot of listening, a lot of deep, challenging, interesting questioning, to some extent, a sense of kind of curiosity about what's going on for people and their stories. So there was a lot of overlap. But when I dove into it, it was without really a clear end in sight. And I think one of the things I wanted to bring to the book was that, yes, I had lived through a career change, but I probably did it all wrong. And if I went again, if I used my own method, I probably wouldn't have gone at it in quite such a higgledy-piggledy way.
Interesting. Yes. So so obviously you qualified as a coach, and you did you had your own journey into that. And this book, have you found that the steps that you outline in the book broadly reflect what actually happened in your life, or did they go, was it a different order?
Yeah, I think bits and pieces, but certainly not in that sort of coherent structure that I now use with my clients and that are featured in the book. So I think one of the things that I didn't do was experiment enough. I jumped in quite quickly to coaching. I went on to a taster day and I looked at it and actually then parted, with quite a lot of time and money, which fortunately I had, to train as a coach. And of course, that ended up being the right thing. But actually, one of the pieces of advice I spend a lot of time talking to people about is, go and dip a toe in without doing the massive jump. So perhaps I did that wrong. But other bits of the book, the steps definitely reflect the process that I went through, but perhaps in a less structured way, as I say. So I have 5 steps in the book. I don't know if it's helpful for me to give a little bit.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So you could just talk us through what the 5 steps are.
Yeah. So on reflection, based on kind of my own experience and perhaps where I went wrong, and also then the methodology I've learned as a coach, specifically a career change coach, the 5 steps in broad terms. The first one is really about preparing. Step 1 is like, get your mindset and your world in order as much as you can. And that sounds very straightforward, but I wanted to share with people some ways that they can approach the mind chatter, because definitely early on, and it's what stops a lot of people even getting into any further steps, is that inner voice that's saying, this is ridiculous. Don't be unrealistic. You've left it far too late. You're too old. You can't earn the same money if you make a career shift. All of those little voices. So I have a section there called Get Off Your Butt, which butt with 1 T, because so many people are like, oh, I would love to be a graphic designer, but, or I would love to make a shift into HR, but, so I spend some time helping people to think about, what kind of mindset do you need to embrace as you start this process? And also preparing involves a little bit around getting used to the idea this is going to take some time and some commitment. And this idea that just follow your passion, just, let dreams be your wings, all these kind of naff things you see on fridge magnets. We would love it if that was the case, but actually most career changes take some time, often anywhere between kind of 6 months and a year or 2 years. So just kind of getting that in perspective can be really helpful, because then you're not doing it wrong if you haven't got a whole new career in 6 weeks. Go figure. So we do a bit of preparing. Then importantly, I do a step called reflecting, which is about building a career profile for yourself, a sense of, well, who am I and what do I want? So, there's lots of exercises there looking at things like what you're good at, your strengths, what excites you, what interests you, what you value, what you're driven by at work, all those kind of things. Step 3 is about ideas, because career change is all about ideas, whether you've got no ideas or you've got far too many, and on a Monday you're ready to be a dog walker, and by Thursday you're running a restaurant, and on Sunday you've got your own funeral home or whatever it is. So that problem, whether you've got too few or too many, how do you deal with ideas? How do you generate them, sort them? What do you do with them? So that's step 3. Then step 4, and I think this is the key piece, is about action taking. When you've got ideas, you've got to kind of go and test them out and do stuff. So that's lots of ways to check out these ideas, so that you don't jump too early. You don't part with, $3 grand to do a master's, and then 5 minutes in think, oh my gosh, I hate psychotherapy, which is what one client of mine who came to me after she'd been through that process. I think her course was about nutrition, but she was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And then step 5 is keeping going, which is all about lasting the course, because there's once you've planned the transition, once you've taken action, explored, you plan a transition, you think, how am I going to make this work? But essentially you've got to then have an action plan to work through. And at that point as well, motivation can wax and wane. People can look at you like you've taken leave of your senses. So that is thinking about sustaining this desire for change and how you might do that, keeping confident, setting out to share this new message about this new identity you've got, what you're trying to do. And all the way through the book are examples of people who've been there and done it. Because of course, there's nothing that beats hearing from someone who's already walked that path and says, yeah, here's where I went wrong. Here was what was hard. Here's some things that really worked for me. So I used some stories from interviews that I did with career changers, some of whom were my clients.
And that's actually really powerful, being able to hear other people's stories who've been on that journey. I have found with myself, actually, the problem is too many, not enough, and the diversity of those ideas. For me, I've found it difficult to figure out what the thread is between them, what is common about those things that makes me think that would be good fun or interesting to do. And
because it is often about looking for patterns, isn't it? Patterns can be helpful. I do encourage people to try and, as part of the book, to try and sort of cluster their ideas, because sometimes, often they do kind of collect under various umbrellas or buckets that you can put them in. So some of them are around kind of helping people, or some might be around working for yourself or whatever, but lots of different ideas. But you're right, then occasionally you get real outliers and you're like, why do I feel like I'd like to do that, which seems to be all about working on my own and being creative and bold, and then this other thing that's all about being in a team and not working for myself but having a salary, and you're like, how am I going to reconcile these two things? And I think that's where a lot of people can get stuck, is that you think you can figure that out. You think, if I sit and look at these ideas for long enough, I just think hard enough, I'm going to see what it is that's driving this or what's driving that, or which of those extremes would be the best idea for me. That's why, for me, probably stage 4, action taking, in the book is the most important, because often you can't think your way forwards. You have to just go and start trying things in really small ways. I don't mean you sign up for a job in that field, but talking to people, shadowing, volunteering, almost trying to go, let me go and try that coat on for size and try and figure out by doing what it is that's driving this idea, as opposed to that idea, and which one ultimately will be the best.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I when I was young, I was quite interested in being a speech therapist, and then I spent a day with a speech therapist, and by the end of it, I was not interested in being a speech therapist. So yeah, absolutely right. For ruling things out as much as encouraging you to get involved. Yeah. So I loved the time to get off your butt section, I have to say, because we all have that. Everybody has that. And in my case, it's always been about being too old, or actually what transferable skills have I got, or one thing I did enjoy as well in that section was, or maybe it was in the reflecting section, actually, you talked about having a team. And I have found it quite interesting in my time to get feedback from other people about what they think my strengths are, because sometimes you don't see things as strengths, and other people will be able to tell you.
And it's in the preparing section, actually, early on. It's about saying, who's going to hold my hand on this journey? And it's often not the people that you think. I think another reason why people get stuck with career change is because when they start dropping this into conversations, and it tends to be initially with close friends, or your mum and dad, or your partner, whatever it might be, you don't always get the response you want. People look at you like, well, how would you make that work? But you've always been in sales, how would you possibly be able to do anything else? And it's often very well intended. People are sort of risk averse on your behalf, sometimes because they've got skin in the game, if they're married to you, or they live with you, or they're your parent, and they've kind of figured out who you are in their brain, and they've put you in a nice little box labeled teacher, or whatever it might be. And so they just don't always have the imagination to see you in any other way. And that's not a failing on their part. It's just we're so used to labeling everybody. So I think getting the right team around you, for people who can give you some accountability, sort of just as if you were trying to run a marathon and build up with training, you'd get a friend to kind of say, look, let's run together once a week. And can you check in on me that I did go out when I said it would? Find someone to go on this journey with you, either because they want to make a career change as well, or they're working on some other project that they could do with some accountability, or even just people who are much more positive and can encourage and won't kind of keep hitting you with the yeah, but. In the book, I talk about people who've had those kind of challenges. So there's a guy, Dave, who I spoke to, who made a career shift. He was in the travel industry, became a software designer. He said his wife actually was fantastic and she really was his anchor. But he said his boss at the time in the travel industry, who was great and he got on really well with, but when he said, oh, I'm going to make this move, I think I'm going to make a change, said, look, yeah, great. Don't forget the job. I don't think it's going to work out for you. The job's always here. And that, again, was meant very kindly, but was almost like a big bucket of cold sick of kind of like, oh, you don't think this is going to work. And similarly, I spoke to a lovely teacher called Sam, who became a charity worker. I think she was already in her late 40s, early 50s. She had waited so long because she said, my parents would have been so disappointed to see me leave teaching. Now, both her parents sadly passed away, but it wasn't until that happened that she thought maybe I can make this shift, because she said I was the first person in my family to go to university. They were really kind of chuffed that I was a teacher. They would not have understood, like, why are you throwing this away to go and do something else? And so she carried a whole weight of expectation from other people. So I think, yeah, getting the right people around you who can see beyond the little label they've given you and all the expectation they've placed on you and kind of go with you into the unknown is really important.
Yes, and very helpful. And so one of the things that that people often ask is, can I not work this out for myself? What use is, what is a career coach going to give me that my family and friends can't?
Yeah, and I think it's often that fact that because they don't know you,
Yeah, yeah.
it's really bad. They come with no expectation. They're just there to really listen to what you're saying, to challenge, to notice things, to help you spot the patterns, and say, every time we have a session, you say you want this, but actually I've noticed you come and you haven't actually ever done any of the things you say you're going to do. Or, one of the things I see you talking about a lot is your need to kind of have autonomy. And yet when you come, you seem to be leaning into jobs where you're going to be part of a big organization. How do you see yourself marrying those two things? Whatever it is, I think the great thing about coaches is they're not afraid, that they're kind of on your team fully, but they're not afraid to ask some of the difficult questions. They're extremely curious. They're brilliant listeners. They're brilliant pattern spotters who can try and make those connections. They can just draw your attention to things, try and shift your perspective, push back a little bit. So I think having somebody who perhaps has no skin in the game and can just say, I'm noticing this, or, and not ever saying it with judgment, like, have you thought, they're just like, what's going on for you here? Why is it that when we speak, I hear this, but I'm seeing that? So I think it can be very powerful. Coaching is an interesting intervention. You have to want it. If you're looking for somebody to tell you what to do, then a coach is not for you. But actually, most people realize I've kind of had enough of the people thinking that they can tell me the answer. This is something I'm going to need to work through. And having somebody alongside me to help me do that, who has no agenda and is just going to help me kind of think differently, can be really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And just throwing this out there, in your career as a coach, what's the biggest change you've seen? Big career change, I mean, for a client.
A really good question. So the one that I love that it features in my book was a lady called Anthea, who worked as a project manager. So she'd worked in kind of various different guises, essentially supporting people on projects. A lot of it was the building industry, people making changes to their house. She worked more alongside the builder than the homeowner, and made all of that happen. And she became a funeral director in her 50s. And that happened through her kind of realizing I like organizing stuff. I have these massive organizational skills. I mean, I'm kind of truncating the story here, obviously.
Mm.
It started, I think she organized, and I can't remember the exact details, but it's in the book. She organized a funeral for a family friend, did it so well, that was just as a voluntary, helpful thing to be a kind person. People started asking her for advice and, well, what did you do? And can you just tell me how that worked? So people started coming to her, and someone said to her, have you ever thought of doing this? And she really got excited. And then what she did, which is the key bit, is that taking action to explore, is she just looked in her local area, found a funeral director, and rang them up and said, look, this might sound like a weird idea, but I'm thinking that maybe I could be quite good at this. I have these kind of skills. Could I come and talk to you? And they said, well, yeah, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's good with dead bodies, but come on in and spend a day. And she went in. She found it absolutely fascinating. She was very good with people. She was very interested in lots of different cultures. So this particular funeral home work supported the bereaved families from all sorts of kind of faith groups and none. And essentially, she timed it just fortuitously, as often happens when you're out there doing stuff to explore your career shift. She was busy just going along and talking to them. When there was a shift in the personnel at the funeral director, an opening came up, and she was there, and they'd met her, they knew her, they could see how good she would be. And several years later, she's now very fulfilled, busy, and happy funeral director.
Marvelous. And I guess that must give you some satisfaction as well, having helped her along the way there.
Yeah, I mean, when you see people make a shift and get to a point where they feel much more contented and they've sort of ticked the boxes that they've talked to you about, it's just fantastic. But that said, and you and I were chatting sort of before we hit the record button, people always say, what's the biggest shift? Imagining that you work a lot with people who were accountants and become zookeepers, actually those shifts are few and far between. One of my other case studies, a client of mine, Stuart, I always say he made a career change. He was a lawyer and he's still a lawyer. But to him, this was a massive career change because he was a lawyer who had ended up, for whatever reason, working for a law firm that worked a lot with sort of big corporates, tobacco, oil, things that he felt quite uncomfortable with and didn't feel aligned with from a values point of view. Found the whole thing, and it started to make him think, maybe I'm just a rubbish lawyer. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Actually, again, over a period of time and exploration, he realized there's stuff I'm interested. I am a good lawyer. This doesn't work for me. I'm interested in sustainability. I'm interested in people and helping and using law sort of for good. And he ended up making a shift and went and worked as an in-house counsel for a philanthropic organization. And now I see him and, he's a very happy lawyer. So he made some changes, but essentially what he does is still being a lawyer. It's just he's changed the whole environment, the whole drivers, the whole values, the kind of people he works with and serves. And that has made a tremendous difference. And I think in a way that's often more normal, not that people stay exactly with what they're doing, but they just learn enough about themselves and they experiment enough to kind of go, this is the root of the problem. If I make this tweak, if I course correct in that way, it will actually feel like an enormous change.
That's a really good point. And because people get into careers in the first place because there's an interest there, and that something about that excites them that isn't really going to go away. So yeah, I can totally see that. I'm just conscious of the time, Rachel, so I'm going to get onto my set of closing questions.
Oh.
The first of which is, have I missed something? Is there something you wish I'd asked you but I haven't?
Have you missed anything? No, I don't think so. I think we've kind of touched on the key points of all of it, and I think I've been able to give you some nice examples as well, which can really help people.
Cool, good. And then I suppose the big question: if somebody's coming to this, reading this book, I'm presuming that they're interested in career change, otherwise they perhaps wouldn't pick the book up. But if there was one message you wanted them to walk away with, having read the book, what would it be?
Yeah, this one is probably the key message I give to anybody, even if they're just talking to me down the pub and start talking about a career shift. It's like, it's the fact that you cannot think your way into a career change. Too many people try and change career from their sofa with a laptop. They
Mm,
spend a lot of time Googling, what could an ex-marketer do? How
mm,
much could I earn if I was a consultant? And they think that the answer will somehow pop out. And inevitably, people have the same kind of 10 tabs open on their computer and they come back to them periodically, imagining that one day the magic answer will come at them. Actually, the one message I would take is, if in doubt, do something. And it doesn't even have to be the right thing. It doesn't have to be, right, I'm ready to start exploring this perfect idea I have. Start with the rubbish ideas, the imperfect ideas, the tiny little sparks of, could this be something? Would this be interesting? And find a way to take action, whether it's going and talking to somebody who already does it, whether it's saying, can I come and spend half a day with you and follow you around a bit like you did? Going along to events or book launches or just places you never go, not because you think that's the immediate answer to your career change dilemma, just to kind of broaden your whole horizons, because so many of us only know one world.
mm,
So a career change is hugely daunting. So we're like, yeah, but I've always worked as a, computers expert. I don't know anything else. Well, then go find some stuff without worrying, is this the right thing? I'm just going to go along to some interesting events or go and meet some new people and say, what do you do? So
mm.
yeah, it's the idea, stop thinking, start doing.
Great. That's a good message. Thank you for that. And then finally, then before we close, um, if people are interested or have read the book, are interested in career change, want to take action, and in particular would like to get some coaching, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is either on LinkedIn. You can see my name along the bottom there and the spelling, Rachel Schofield, or my website, which is www.rachelschofield.co.uk. So simple, just my name, put it in a search engine, and I'll ping up for you somewhere and just drop me a line.
Brilliant. Okay. So once again, thank you for your time and thank you for agreeing to be interviewed by the Business Bookcase. And thank you for your book being November's book of the month. Hopefully people will read it, be inspired, think about what they're going to do in 2025 because it's not far away now. And what else can I say? Merry Christmas. Probably about
Absolutely.
it.
And New Year is a chance.
Happy New Year.
New Year,
Yeah.
new, really naff, but New Year, why not get curious about what it could look like? Less naff.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, thank you very much, Rachel. And I hope people enjoy our little chat.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. Thank you.